It's hard to find someone who hasn't heard of Resident Evil. Known more commonly as Abatel's La, Evil's Abode, in Russian, it's a franchise familiar not only to gamers but also to those who've watched the zombie saga starring Milla Jovovich or explored other projects within this universe. While the adaptations, to put it mildly, strayed from the source material, it seems everyone recognizes the franchise's potential. Recently, it was announced that another Resident Evil film is on the way, one that might finally get it right. Will Milla return? Is this a full reboot? And which part of the game series will it adapt? We'll break it all down in the next few minutes. Get comfortable, because, as always, it's going to be interesting. Resident Evil kicked off as a film franchise back in 2002 with Paul W.S. Anderson's movie of the same name. At the time, the director's project made waves, becoming one of the most notable game adaptations of its era, even though it had little in common with the games. The Resident Evil of the 2000s immediately veered toward a more fast-paced narrative. The first film certainly felt like a horror movie, mirroring the game's tone in certain moments. But with each subsequent installment, it drifted further from the source material and deeper into over-the-top action. As a result, ratings from both critics and audiences steadily declined. Yet, the final film in the series grossed $300 million on a $40 million budget, proving that interest in Resident Evil still lingered. However, something had to change, and fast. Paul Anderson helmed 6 Resident Evil films, collectively raking in over $1 billion at the box office. But his ideas were leading nowhere. So, the 2021 reboot attempt, Resident Evil, Welcome to Raccoon City, was meant to be a fresh start. It even brought in iconic franchise characters like the Redfields, Jill Valentine, Ada Wong, and Leon Kennedy. But the film barely broke even, despite being much closer to the games and borrowing plot elements directly from them. Even so, gamers didn't embrace it either, and it faced criticism for just about everything. The most recent adaptation attempt ended up on Netflix. 3 years ago, the streaming giant ordered a series simply titled Resident Evil, with plans for a couple of seasons. However, it diverged so drastically from the games that it could have been called something else entirely, and might have attracted a new audience that way. Instead, the creators banked on the appeal of being part of a big franchise rather than proving its worth from scratch. The result? It infuriated Resident Evil fans and performed poorly overall, quickly pivoting to a miniseries format. You'd think that'd be the end of adaptations, but not quite. Now it's Zach Cregger's turn to take a stab at Resident Evil. The director of Barbarian will not only helm this new Resident, but also write its script. What's more, Cregger has already pitched his vision and first draft, sparking a bidding war among studios like Netflix and Warner Brothers. But Sony, desperate for a strong franchise after wrapping up its Spider-Verse, came out on top. Despite the mostly scathing reviews of past Resident Evil films, they consistently turned a profit. So it's no surprise a real fight broke out over this one. Even Raccoon City, despite its lukewarm reception, wasn't a financial flop. Netflix's interest only signals their desire to make up for the tepid response to their earlier Resident series. In the hands of a rising director who's proven himself with taut thrillers laced with horror, the franchise might finally shine. Reports suggest Cregger's initial take is described as truer to the original games and their horror roots. The director himself has noted he's been a fan of the game series for decades, so he knows exactly what the new film should be. His draft balances the demands of the fanbase while making it accessible to a brand new audience. Producers of the upcoming reboot are raving about the script, claiming it'll win over all fans. They're also calling it one of Sony's most important projects for next year. Clearly, the studio is betting big on Cregger, shelling out a hefty $20 million for him to write, direct, and produce. That kind of payday is usually reserved for seasoned directors with extensive track records, but Cregger must have offered something extraordinary for Sony to lock him down. The film is currently slated for a theatrical release in September 2026, just a year and a half away. Factoring in post-production and marketing, that leaves little time for filming, which needs to start no later than this fall. Otherwise, Resident Evil could slip to 2027. Pre-production is underway, final script tweaks are being made, and the project is rapidly taking shape. While plot details remain under wraps, some tidbits have leaked. Notably, there's news about the cast. Austin Abrams, likely remembered by Walking Dead fans, is set to join the new Resident adaptation. As the first announced actor, he's probably landing a central role. He hasn't signed a contract yet, but it's only a matter of time. The question on many fans' minds: will Milla Jovovich appear in the new film? The actress became one of the biggest action stars of the 2000s thanks to Resident Evil. But at this point, it's too late for her to return to her biggest franchise. So don't expect Milla, even in a cameo. The rest of the cast is still coming together, but they'll likely lean toward lesser-known actors. What's confirmed is that this new Resident Evil will be a complete reboot, unconnected to all prior adaptations. This time, the project will embrace the atmosphere of the original games in every way, avoiding the descent into mindless action. Assuming audiences respond well, the reboot is expected to spawn multiple sequels. The upcoming Resident Evil is poised to finally get it right, properly showcasing the world building and adapting the game series after years of misfires. The biggest flaw of all previous films? None of them were particularly scary. Perhaps the most memorable moment was the laser hallway scene in the first movie, one of the few gripping, genuinely tense moments in the entire series. That's exactly what the adaptations have been missing. The shift to action gave moviegoers a very different impression of the franchise compared to gamers. The new adaptation's challenge is to bridge that gap. Zach Cregger's involvement bodes well. He's already shown a knack for the genre, crafting horror that doesn't rely solely on jump scares. Tension in his work comes from atmosphere and unexpected plot twists. His Barbarian is a prime example, recommended even to those who can't stand horror. Cregger will almost certainly steer Resident Evil away from familiar action tropes and into atmospheric horror. While Milla kicking zombie dogs mid-acrobatic leap looks cool, it barely resembles the source material. Interestingly, rumors have surfaced about which game Cregger's plot adapts. If Anderson's films were a mishmash of game ideas and characters, this new take will follow the timeline more faithfully. According to leaks, the first film adapts the less popular Resident Evil 0. This prequel to the main series takes place a day before the first game's events. In short, it explores how the Umbrella Corporation created the T-virus and what led up to it. There's room for experiments and mutants beyond just zombies. Fans of claustrophobic horror likely loved the train sequence. The prequel's ending sets up the first game's events without featuring the franchise's main heroes. The advantage of this adaptation? Its contained scope. No need for a sprawling zombie metropolis or outlandish creatures. Though the plot does include a giant mutated leech, that could be reworked. Overall, the film's vibe will likely echo Barbarian, which Cregger nailed. That makes it a fitting direction for the new Resident Evil. If successful, a sequel could unfold in the iconic mansion, another contained story that stays within horror's bounds, introducing heroes familiar to game fans. Of course, this should all be taken with caution for now. But if the rumor holds, Krieger picked an ideal part to adapt. It's closely tied to the original games without retelling their events. Since Resident Evil 0 came out nearly 30 years ago, many skipped it, and its re-release didn't gain traction due to dated mechanics. That makes the prequel's story fresh content for most. That's a win for the creators. Overall, expectations for the new Resident Evil aren't sky high, but there's potential for a quality project. Here's hoping the franchise finds its proper form on screen and can grow from there. When it comes to introducing the series' main heroes, casting will be key. But that's still a few years off. For now, we're crossing our fingers, eager to see what Zach Krieger has in store. Be sure to comment below. Which of Milla Jovovich's Resident Evil films did you like best? Also, share your concerns about yet another reboot, and your thoughts on the chosen game for adaptation. That's all for today, friends. See you in the next video soon.